I'm Jan Belden. I'm the chair of the Pollinator Plot Steering Committee, which is a part of our Northeast Minnesota Synod Eco-Faith leadership team. And I'm a member of St. Andrews in Grand Rapids. And that's all I need to say about me. Let's just kind of go around and tell your name and your congregation and maybe where you are at. If you want to mention if you have a pollinator plot or not, that's fine too. We'll have questions later. And yes, our congregation does have a pollinator plot. Bruce, you want to go next?
I'm Vicki Anderson at Zion Lutheran Church Cloquet, and with me is Pastor Christina Johnson from Zion Lutheran. You get 2 for 1 today on one screen. We have pollinator plots.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes, Laura Radeke. I'm a chair of the Creation Care Team since 2008 at Lutheran Church of the Cross in Nisswa. And we kind of got going with was an early starter of the pollinator project. Plus, at home, I have been naturalizing parts of our 5.5 acres for about 2 decades now. And trial and error.
So lots of experience, and she is on our steering committee, as is Vicki too. Bruce.
Hi, I'm Bruce Garbish. I'm from Trinity Lutheran in Cook, and we have a pollinator plot. I've enjoyed working on that for a couple of years, and I'm working on pollinator gardens and meadows at home as well. And I want to comment, my audio, to me at least, is really kind of balky and erratic. Sometimes it's cutting in and out. So let me know if you can't hear me, if I cut out. I can't tell that part.
Okay. You're coming through very well. And this is important because he is one of our presenters. Let's go to Diane. And you are muted. You're muted, Diane. Need to have you unmute. There should be a little red microphone with a line through it there.
Yes. I'm new to this.
We all can, can sympathize with this.
Diane Jones from Bethesda in Malmo. And yes, we do have a pollinator garden, plus lots of flowers and butterflies and bees. And I'm raising butterflies at home.
Oh, great. John Stiles, did I get you with a mouthful of lunch? I'm sorry.
Hi. I'm at Our Redeemer in Pine City. And yes, we have a pollinator garden in the back by the preschool playground. And we also recycle plastic bags from Walmart and Cub Food and make them into park benches. So that's been kind of a fun thing to haul up. I think we're about 100 pounds shy of our goal to get through the end of December. So we're trying to get a lot more people to donate their plastic, but those are a couple things we're doing.
Nice. Thank you. Mike Vant?
Yeah, I'm Mike Vant from Shoreview, Incarnation Lutheran in Shoreview. I fear I might be the one that said I couldn't make it today, but I decided this was more important, so I skipped my other event. But we do have a nice pollinator garden at Incarnation, as well as in my yard here in the Twin Cities.
Hey, thank you. I parked in your parking lot about 2 weeks ago for a cross-country meet. So he's our,
What happened?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Thank you. Good to have you here outside of the Northeast Minnesota Synod. Let's see. Kay Melberg.
Hi, I'm Kay. I'm with Faith Lutheran Church in Forest Lake, Minnesota. And we do not currently have a pollinator plot, but we, in the next week or two, are installing 400 solar panels in a ground mount array. And we're planning on putting in a pollinator area there.
Ooh, good. We're going to talk about that. Thank you. I'm going to lose here. Russ, have you introduced yourself yet?
Not yet.
Thank you.
So start now?
Yep.
Russ Schultz with Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Brainerd, and we are a pollinator congregation, and I'm the Creation Care Team leader. We're working on our second pollinator garden. Our second one is going to be a lot more visible to the congregation, so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, my name is Sari Proschel. I'm the program director at Camp Onamia, which is in Onamia. I think we technically, I guess I don't know if we're officially have a pollinator garden, but this past year we did some small planting areas at the camp house. And so that's kind of our big project. And then many more ideas for the future.
Mm-hmm. Great to have one of our camps represented here. Sherry.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am having a hard time hearing you guys, but I took my picture off because I have to put it so close to my phone, close to my ear that you're gonna look at my ear if I'm putting my picture up there. So I just started a pollinator garden, but we haven't got it at all started actually. We've got 3 planters that we're going to be putting out, but they're full of weeds, and we've got plants, and we've got, I can buy soil. I got a $250 micro grant from EcoFaith, and we're going to, start this fall now, but I'm not a gardener, so I'm really having to figure out how to do it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and you're driving in your car. I know that. And we're
Oh
going to
yeah, I
record
stopped
this.
though. I can't hear without
Oh,
when I was driving, and
Oh.
I'm from St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Palo, Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. Let's see now. Carrie.
I also can't put my video on. I'm multitasking, but I'm from St. Paul Lutheran Church in Wyoming, Minnesota, and we are talking about trying to put in a pollinator garden. So looking for information.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, we're going to start out here with Pastor Kristen Foster, who has not got to introduce herself yet, but she is the co-chair of our Synod Eco Faith leadership team. Energy unbounded and and she's failed at retirement totally, but she is technically a retired pastor.
Yeah, well, several of us have failed at retirement. That's why we're here, and I think that's probably a good thing. Welcome to everybody. I'm so glad to see everybody. I'd like to do a devotion that centers on the gospel meaning of the pollinator plot, because we believe that the pollinator creatures are actually a model or even mentors of what it means to be part of the kingdom of God, part of the alternative way of being human, of being creatures. They never measure they never measure their importance by their size, and neither do we. They never consider whether they themselves individually can accomplish all the pollinating in the world, and neither should we. They never look at themselves alone, but they ceaselessly perform a miracle of their own desire to pollinate, their own need to do what God made them to do, creates life, creates fruit. And so they give us a sense of what Jesus always taught us, which is it's the mustard seed that grows into the large tree. And it's the least of us and the last of us and those who feel lost and maybe on the side that are able to be the greatest in the kingdom of God. My gospel word to you this morning as we begin is that welcome to being part of a plot where there is no such thing as insignificant. There's no such thing as an effort that is too small, because you belong to a plot that is divine, God's plot to bring creation into the flourishing life that God intends. So if we could if we could have done a snapshot of the congregations here, there's tiny congregations that are part of the pollinator plot, and there's large congregations. There's urban and there's rural. There's those that can't afford a pastor and those who have a staff. And isn't that just amazing what together we can do because of what the gospel is and how the gospel works? So my key verse as I conclude is from there's many, but from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, beginning with verse 26. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, things that are not, to reduce to nothing things that are, so that no one might boast in the presence of God. He is the source of your life in Christ Jesus. And so, in a world where we are continually overwhelmed and disheartened by the anti-life actions of major powers, let us never forget the pollinators around us and the possibilities that come when we are communities that bear life and that bring life to one another and to the earth. Amen.
Amen. We needed that. We have two more introductions. Karen Edmondson just joined us a moment ago, and then I missed Beth Potratz too. So Karen, we just gave our name and congregation and where we're located and if we had a plot, something like that.
Okay, I'm Karen Edmondson from Zion Lutheran Church in Malacca. And we just put our plot in this spring and it's doing quite well. We're really happy about it.
All right, thank you. And Beth will be speaking a little bit later. Maybe she had to, nope, there she is. No, it moved. Anyway, she will, oh, there you are up at the top of the screen, Beth. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Beth Potratz. I'm a pastor in the Northeastern Minnesota Synod. This is Olivia. And I am the Eco-Faith Communication Coordinator currently. And yeah, so I'm behind all the emails that you've got.
Yes.
Yeah.
She is also a pastor and does a lot for, a lot for us. And we're going to be hearing from her later. We're covering a lot of ground today in this Share and Learn. For the sharing aspect, we're going to talk about how to increase involvement and understanding within our congregations in regards to pollinator plots. And there's the practical side also. There's the double meaning to plot, meaning the ground where our plants are, and then the plot is how we plan to influence others. The practical side, we're ending the growing season, good time to take a look at what's been going on. If there's a need to diversify, if there's invasive plants that need to come out, someone had mentioned grass as creeping in there, or how to get rid of it. And we're going to review some best practices for fall. And thank you for the good questions that were submitted. We'll get to those later. And we'll have Beth speaking later, talking about our website, the newsletter, other resources. And then, of course, a Share and Learn has a learning component. In this case, addressing why pollinator plots are needed, why biodiversity is important, and why is this a matter for the church, a matter of faith. So I'm turning it over to Bruce Garbish at this point for that input. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. Yeah, actually, in today's address, I didn't so much focus on why it's important for the church, but anyway, I am going to talk about kind of the theoretical constructs between why it's so incredibly important that we have these itsy bitsy pollinator plots, which is Pastor mentioned, are incredibly important despite being small. So for this, we're going to kind of step back from what we all enjoy, getting our hands dirty, putting in seeds, planting plugs, pulling the weeds, getting our knees on the ground, dirt under our fingernails. That's all fun and that's all admirable. But I want to focus on the broader picture. I want to just kind of back up from that, get up to 30,000 feet, and ask you to think about, what is this all about? Why was it so important that our synod passed our entire resolution declaring our synod to become a pollinator synod? What's that all about? Why is it so important? Why are we so obsessed with using native plants in all of this? And what role does biodiversity play in all of this? So the learning part is going to be talking about biodiversity and talking about the importance of native plants. So let's start with biodiversity. Now, I was surprised to read just yesterday that this term didn't even exist until 1985. Can you imagine that? Most of us were middle-aged when the term came into existence. So it was coined by the renowned ecologist Edmund Wilson. Now, to me, the term biodiversity is pretty straightforward, really, in terms of its etymology. Bio means life, and diversity comes from a Latin root, which means a variety of, or varied. So how diversity can become a dirty word in our current political climate is beyond my comprehension. To me, it's a beautiful word, variety. So literally, biodiversity, a variety of life. And for most of our history on this planet, the planet was synonymous with a rich and incredibly diverse variety of life. They were one and the same. And to what extent humans had an impact on it, they were relatively minor and entirely non-disruptive. But here's the big but. That biodiversity has been profoundly compromised by numerous forces, almost all of which have sort of run ramshot over us just in the last couple of centuries, and in particularly maybe in the last 50 years. Almost everything that has contributed to the loss of our biodiversity has been human caused. I'll mention a few. Global warming is huge in destroying diversity, acidification of our oceans, large-scale destruction of our natural habitat, the rampant incursion of invasive species, habitat fragmentation, pollution, overuse of pesticides and herbicides, and I would say in general, underlying so much of this has been our penchant for treating the natural world as a commodity to be used, and probably more accurately to say to be abused, exploited for our own pleasure and profit. We've too seldom viewed it as a precious God-given resource to be embraced and revered and protected. All of that has contributed to the demise of our biodiversity. Now, here's a widely accepted precept among most biologists. The extent of the present day loss of our biodiversity is threatening the health of our planet. And our future welfare seriously depends on our ability to restore it sufficiently to prevent the widespread collapse of the natural ecosystems on which all of life depends, including our own survival. Now, that same Edmund Wilson that I mentioned, his research led him to conclude this. He said, quote, "To save the planet, we must save more than half of the planet for nature." Well, this is 2025, and we've already lost, well, more than half of our planet for nature. From my perspective, then our backs are kind of to the wall. Entomologist Doug Tallamy, who's really at the forefront of some of the movements to encourage restoration, such as we're trying to do with our churches, he has said this. For the United States, he says, our natural areas are no longer large enough to sustain the nature that sustains us. And I want to wrap up my comments on biodiversity to share this with you. It's a quote which rattles a lot in my mind, and it comes from a scholar named Jason Hickel. He said this. He said, our use of the term biodiversity loss is an incredibly strange euphemism for what really is the rampant destruction of all non-human beings.
Right.
And I kind of like the term other than human rather than non-human. It doesn't sound quite so egocentric from a human perspective. But anyway, of all those other than human beings, the ones that are facing the most immediate threat from decline of our biodiversity are those in our insect populations. Wilson said this as well. He said, quote, "Insects are the little things that run the world. Life as we know it depends entirely on the insects." So collectively, this insect population is crucial to the health of our ecosystems because it forms sort of the base or the foundation which constitutes the pyramid of life. And among those insects, the pollinators are often singled out because of their importance in assuring the adequacy of our own food supply. But it turns out about 1/3 of our food production depends on pollinators. And pollinator-dependent foods are many, but include lots of the nuts, a lot of the fruits, and a lot of the vegetables. And they make a huge contribution in terms of the diversity of our diet, which we need to maintain healthy, wholesome, nutritious food sources. Now, some folks talk about an insect apocalypse. Maybe you've heard that term. It refers to a potentially catastrophic collapse of the insect population. Which clearly would seriously impact our own odds of surviving as humans. Now, many scientists fear this as a distinct possibility. Some fear it already as an inevitability. I'm not sure where we're at with that. But if it occurs, it occurs to me that those of you on the screen in front of me and myself, we're not likely to starve. We aren't. We're white, we're healthy, wealthy, privileged beyond all reason. But there are 3 or 4 billion others of our neighbors living elsewhere who aren't in such good shape as we are. So in a sense, these little attempts at restoration of native habitat and healthy insect populations take on broader implications, enormous implications for our neighbors elsewhere in the world with respect to poverty, social justice, and world hunger. Don't ever forget that. Okay, a little shift in gears. Why do we so strongly emphasize native plants in these pollinator plots? First, just a word about plants in general. They are so amazing. Plants are the only living organism which are able to harness the energy of the sun and through the miracle of photosynthesis, convert water and carbon dioxide into plant material, which serves as a source of food for every other life form on the planet. Insects, in particular, are also almost entirely dependent on plants. The vast majority of insects are herbivores. Now comes the key concept on why many of us here are sort of OCD about using native plants. And I have this in capital letters as I'm reading it to you. Here's the key line here. Insects can only thrive on plants with which they have co-evolved through Earth's billions of years of long history. I'll explain that a little more. So insects have, learned, in quotes, over mind-boggling immense spans of time to deal with and adapt to the naturally occurring chemicals within the plants they eat. Now, the plant's chemistry is their way of combating destruction by the insects. And the insect's wisdom is learning to adapt to that to survive despite the plant's ingenious defenses. So most of the life on this planet, it has been a best of all possible worlds with a delicate balance being maintained between the insects and the plants. They both survive to the mutual benefit of each other. That balance is being destroyed. Furthermore, a lot of insects are specialists. That is, they have learned to depend on just one or a handful of species of plants to meet their own nutritional needs. Many of you are very familiar with the monarch butterfly, because that's a classical example of that and well known. In other words, the monarch caterpillar can only survive by eating the milkweed plant. And there are many, many other examples of that. Okay, so what's the deal if we just have some non-native plants present in our gardens, especially if they're present in our abundance? Now, it turns out that most of the plants that we get from nurseries have either been genetically modified to be more aesthetically pleasing. They're called cultivars, and many of them originally came from Asia or Europe. Most often they've been promoted for reasons other than issues of health of the ecosystems. People have been attracted to foreign plants for a long time because of their novelty, their aesthetics, they're prestigious, they look different, they're exotic, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the problem. Those plants or the insects in North America have no evolutionary history with those plants whatsoever. That means they usually can't utilize them very efficiently as a food source. And if our gardens have those cultivars and non-native species in them, from our insects perspective, they're impoverished in their ability to benefit from them. So if we have a lot of non-native plants, there's not enough food to support the insects. Now here's an interesting example, again from Doug Tellamy, the entomologist. He did a research study on a grove of native oak trees in New England, and he studied an equal-sized grove of trees in a parkland nearby, which consisted entirely of ginkgo, the beautiful tree from Asia. You know, we've all seen how beautiful they are. So he counted the number of caterpillars he could find on both trees. Again, equal numbers of trees. The caterpillars outnumbered those on the ginkgos. The caterpillars on the oaks outnumbered those on the ginkgos by a ratio of 100 to 1. In other words, the ginkgos were about 1/100th as helpful supporting the insect population life as the native oaks were. And that generalization is true across the vast majority of plant species that are either cultivars or foreign or both or non-native. Okay. So that, I hope, explains a bit about the biodiversity crisis and why we think natural plantings are so important. And I hope we found it succinct and compelling, but broadly speaking, not only for our church, really, not only for our church plots, but think of this also in terms of your own work, your own gardens, your own residential plantings. It's equally important there for supporting our species. And Tellamy said, finally, he said, a diversity of plants helps to ensure a diversity of insects. The way we garden for nature will determine what life looks like for future generations. So those pollinator plots are small, but really important. That's the end of my spiel. Thank
you. That very well researched, and I think I'm going to want to listen to the recording because I think I'll pick up even more the next time through. Thanks. Our next topic is how to involve congregational members of all ages in the plot and to help our congregation identify as a pollinator congregation. And Russ Schultz has so kindly offered to kind of lead us into that discussion. They've had a lot of experience down in Brainerd doing some pretty neat things.
Well, thank you, Jan. Do I have like about 10 minutes or something?
Yep.
I'll try to be brief here. It's a little different. Thank you, Bruce, for your description of biodiversity. I worked for the DNR for 34 years in a professional capacity. And internally, before the definition of biodiversity we used the term uniculture. And when uniculture, you plant all the same item. And the other term that we used is biological desert associated with uniculture. It fits, but your description of biodiversity is a little more positive than we were looking at. But anyway, I want to get back into what the topic is about today. I'm going to not be in the micromanaging mode about the types of plants and things like that as much as bringing along the congregation into your project. It's kind of one of those things that it's very important. And we realized that from the onslaught in Brainerd that we needed to engage the congregation it's their project, it's their type of effort. and I'll stay with pollinator plots, but this applies to the other efforts creation care teams do work on. And again, Kristen talked about the diversity of our congregations, and we have a one-person creation care team. Then we also have a creation care team of maybe 4 or 5 members. But it all, I think, applies that the congregation is an important part of this process. And there's ways to do that. And that's kind of what I wanted to just mention, that we became a pollinator congregation about 3 years ago. And one of the things is to build awareness into the congregation is I went to the leadership and got their approval, went to their boards. We're structured a little different. We have boards. But anyway, all our leadership did support it. And from there, we put it into our church bulletin. We're a pollinator congregation. And there's more to come. We're going to develop a pollinator plot. And one thing we could have easily done is get a Thrivent grant to purchase those native plants and for the planting. We decided to engage the congregation in a different way. Funding for the plants came through a noisy offering effort in our church. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's the children, and during the church service goes around, collect change and everything else for a month. And we received about $330 from that effort and purchased the plants. The beauty of it was the congregation felt they're contributing to something, they're part of it. And also in our bulletins each week, it was mentioned money is going towards purchasing pollinator plants. So it's serving quite a few different purchases. So I just wanted to mention that that's kind of our effort, is to engage the congregation in many different ways. And one thing we did, and when I mentioned earlier that we are looking at a second pollinator plant, we already went through, I think it's June 22nd, Pollinator Sunday. We went through the whole process, and thanks to the Eco Faith leadership team for the bundle of material that you supplied, because our pastor during the children's sermon used the materials, the mandala, and they for the children to color and things. So it was another way to communicate to our congregation that this is important. The reason why we went to a second pollinator plot is because the first one wasn't quite so visible to the congregation. This one, and this came from feedback from the congregation, by the way. That's the other thing we need to, I missed talk about there. But we ended up dedicating a church parking lot island for the next pollinator plot. And on June 22nd, we dedicated the plot and the whole works and went through that process. And it was kind of nice because it's really visible. And with the sign there, Pollinator Congregation and the whole works, the congregation is building an awareness there that this is what we're doing. It's not just a creation care team, it's the church. And so that's kind of what we've been doing. I'm going over this quickly, but there's a lot of other things that could be done. We did, thanks to, and I'm going to digress a little bit here, thanks to a grant by the Eco Faith leadership, that we had buckthorn problems on some of our church property, and we brought in, through the grant that we received, we brought in goats. And the goats, we had about 30 goats, and we put electric wire around our fence. And I ended up notifying the neighboring property owners just as a courtesy to them. And we held a picnic out in the parking lot for the congregation to meet the goats. And it was really effective. And it was a petting area, and the owners of the goats were really cooperative. They brought their other goats in, and the kids were able to pet them. So this is another opportunity for the congregation to be involved and to be aware of what's going on. And that's kind of my message today, is just there's a lot of things you could be creative about doing. And I will back up a little bit. We developed a brochure after we had going here. This probably doesn't show up very well, but it was a nice brochure, and we sort of documented, and that was through a Thrivent grant, by the way. We ended up, one of the first things we did is we decided to, besides rolling up our sleeves and sitting down and working on projects, which everybody sort of has a tendency to do, get going. but it's more to build awareness to the congregation. So we created a commitment. And it's a three-part commitment, if you don't mind if I read it. Creation Care Team commitment to enlighten, create stewardship awareness within the church congregation so that the congregation embraces the need to care for God's creation. Number two, to provide guidance, build a creation care setting within Bethlehem Lutheran for members to participate in good stewardship practices. And number three, to reach out to the community so that Bethlehem Lutheran is a participant in the creation of in the creation care community network. So it's a three-part thing. And the reason why we developed a brochure, it's more of a reminder to our team that not only do we have a project and are working on things, how do we engage the congregation and build awareness and education? That's kind of where we're coming from. And this is kind of the things that we're doing. And I've been on so many committees, and it's always easy for a committee to sit down and roll up their sleeves and want to work on a project and everything, which is well done. But they end up looking at the micromanaging things instead of going to the 30,000-foot level and seeing that the congregation needs to be involved. So it's a two-part thing, and that's the message I want to leave here today, is that it's one of those, it's nice to work on projects, but it's also, you have to be aware of the congregation. And the other thing I'm just thinking of now is the pastors of the congregation may not be visibly supporting you because they represent the whole congregation. And so behind the scenes, they support you, and that's what's happening here with Bethlehem. And because they opened a few doors, the pastors have, for our congregation, our creation care team to be part of work groups. And we initially started out listening to the congregation, hearing what they would like to see in creation care. And that's part of our brochure. We listed all the items we heard from the congregation and the things that they're interested in: composting, battery collection, rainwater collection, the whole works. And it's not just creation care sitting down, rolling up their sleeves. We have sort of a list of things that the congregation is interested in. And that's kind of our marching orders type of thing. So, sorry, am I taking up too much time, or?
No, that is just excellent. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I want to see the contents of this brochure. You know, you read through your emphases, and I couldn't get them down. So, you know, Beth, maybe there's a way we can either have an article in our newsletter, Green Blades Rising, or if we can send an email with some of that content to us, we'll talk about that. Yeah, so many good ideas there. Thank you so much. And do you have your mug with you today?
I do. And that's another thing we do. Through a Thrivent grant, it doesn't come out very well here. Yeah. Anyway, we got permission from the Synod to use the mandala, but we put around Bethlehem Lutheran as a congregation, Pollinator congregation on the outside. And we're having a little fun with handing out these stickers to the,
yes.
And so it's another way of building an awareness. And I could tick off a lot of things we've done with Thrivent grants. I mean, we're a team. We're not, actually an official capacity of the church, but we're getting things done. We don't have a budget, whatever, but we have financial sources. Thrivent, we did reusable shopping bags. We threw a Thrivent grant with the church's logo on the outside, and we stuffed them into the mailboxes for our members. Things you can do that doesn't really take a lot of cost and everything, but it's telling the congregation, we're there and you should be here. So thank you. And by the way, the last thing we did was we upgraded our website on the Bethlehem Lutheran to add a pull-down button for creation care. And that's been very effective, not just for our members, but for other people doing searches around. And I've been contacted by a lot of people. Oh, what's creation care about? And this Lakes Justice Table group contacted me, and it's a different thing altogether, but it's a local area. deal.
Okay, so we could go to your website and look at some of this then.
And I think the brochure is on there too.
Okay, and what's your church website? What do we look for?
I gotta remember how this is. It's belc.net.
Oh, that's short. Okay.
And then there's a pull down for creation care. It actually has a lot of different interests, and it refers back to the Eco Faith team and the whole work. So
Well,
you can
good.
find, you know.
Thank you. Boy, is that a lot of pollination, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Somebody else want to share some of the things that they've been doing or some ideas?
I'd like to ask a question of Russ. Russ, I'm interested if you did such a great job getting the congregation involved and aware and educated. Did that lead to any of them wanting to join or choosing to join your creation care team? Did it interact that way at all?
Yes, it did, Bruce. In fact, what led to it, I skipped over it. There's so many things we've been doing. We've been having forums once a year in between services, and now we're down to one, but we've been having forums on creation care. And after our meeting on one of our forums, we had people come up and say, I want to be part of your team. And that's sort of our recruitment right now. And it's been working pretty well. And so, but the beauty of it, and I might just add the makeup of our team are, besides people experts in the field like biology and whatever else, we also have 2 past presidents that were in the congregation. So the know-how church business works is important. So we have a topic, oh, we need to contact this board member, we need to do this. So we have the ability to be able to make the right moves at the right places within the church organization. So that's another benefit. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sad that Bob Gavris isn't here with us today. He's on our leadership or on our pollinator plot, and he belongs to a church in Twig. And just the word Twig, you know, this is a small church. I think Bob not only takes care of the church, but he plants the pollinator plot. And, you know, how do you generate when you maybe have just a tiny, tiny church and maybe a Sam, if you're lucky, that comes in. And he was telling us at a meeting that he always made a point to bring people over to even show them the plot. People that are supportive but are unable to really work on it. But that way he is educating and gaining support. And that's a nice thing too. I want to welcome Wanda Clark. She just joined us a couple minutes ago. She's from St. Andrews in Grand Rapids, like I am. Yeah.
Jan, may I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Beth Podratz brought up a good idea. And she recommended that maybe it's a good idea for all the churches around the Brainerd area that have pollinator plots to do sort of a round robin thing, is like go visit one Saturday morning, go to visit each church's pollinator plot and do like a progressive dinner or effect type of thing. So that was a good recommendation. I'm still working on that, Beth, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I've done that just this summer driving around. If I know there's a plot at a church, I'll kind of check it out and get good ideas that way. We have a map on our website that shows the pollinator plot congregations that you can kind of check that out. We should move on and talk a little bit about caring for our plots. We'll do a little nuts and bolts things here. Some people have been talking about invasives, the non-natives that are kind of creeping in. Laura, do you want to take a few minutes and talk about anything that may pertain to our plot care, please?
Yes, the invasive species that can creep in, and sometimes very quickly, even they caught me unawares. You maybe have heard of creeping bellflower. It is an invasive that quickly creates a thick green mat very early in the spring. And then maybe in July, it sends up a shoot, a stalk that produces beautiful purple bell-shaped flowers all on one side of it. So it's very graceful, very poetic. However, after those 2 weeks of beauty, and I've never really seen any pollinators frequent those plants, it creates many seeds. Each stalk can produce 1,000 seeds, and it just spreads. It's got a creeping root structure that's very much to the surface. So the last few years, I've heard other people have been saying the same thing. I go out in July and just pull them. They pull out very easily by the root, but still it leaves that mat of roots behind. So I'm hoping that if I keep doing that and in my ditches, I will eventually fatigue the root structure. In the meantime, I have discovered, and I've tried it out, a natural weed killer substance you can make using 1 gallon of white vinegar, and that's at the 5% acetic acid. That's common household vinegar. 1 gallon of that, 1 cup of table salt, or I use Epsom. I have a bunch of Epsom salts around, so I use that. And then 1 tablespoon of Dawn dish soap, and that seems to be in anything, any kind of cleanser or any kind of homemade product. It seems to have Dawn in it. So mix those all up and put it into a garden sprayer that when you spray it, it can just locate any weed. I've used it in between our paver and sidewalk cracks. And I'm going to this next spring, get out there and use it right away when I first see that mat of green, they're pretty green leaves that form a thick mat. They're one of the earliest things to come up. And that can be some way that any of your invasives, there's garlic mustard, I know that's a long time problem, or anything you don't want, grasses, you spray with this substance, preferably on a warm, sunny day in which you'll have several days of sun. And that way you can target the weed killing properties on the plants that you want. It might not destroy all roots depending on the plant, so you might have to redo it once or twice more during the summer. But I have discovered that that does work, and I'm going to put that to more use because I do not want to ever go back to using Roundup or pre-emergent herbicides or anything that is very damaging. Now, a vinegar and salt solution is not without some side effects, and so you're supposed to, if you use it too much, it can affect soil health, and it can even inhibit the growth of new plants. So you just want to be very judicious in the use. And then you don't want to use it near anywhere where it can get into water supplies, any groundwater or creeks or any standing water. You want to make sure it doesn't get into that. Let's see. Yes, aquatic life can be impacted by it if it seeps into nearby water surfaces. So it's just being careful with it. Make sure that I put big glasses on so you don't accidentally spray in your eyes. You can wear rubber gloves. If you have a really good quality garden sprayer that's got a long hose and you're not near it, it shouldn't be a problem. But that is something I've discovered about invasives. And unfortunately, I have discovered too, after doing this for a couple of decades, of clearing areas around the edge of our property where there are woods, and planting a lot of the coneflowers, more of the prairie type plants. Woodland stuff eventually wants to come in, and the native asters, the Lysomachia, just all sorts of woodland things that want to come in. I am no longer fighting that. I know my battles. Now I'm saving the battles for the truly noxious. And by the way, Wisconsin just labeled the creeping bellflower a noxious weed, meaning it will be illegal to plant it or to let it go to seed. So we're going to have some creeping bellflower police making the rounds. Minnesota is in the process of considering that. So we went to our neighbors. They said, oh, we'll just wait until Minnesota declares it. I said, would it be all right? Jerry and I will come over. And we picked out a huge wheelbarrow full of their weeds, of those particular weeds. and it was fun to do it. I felt very good and cathartic to get rid of those things, but they're just spreading everywhere. I've heard many reports about that. And I don't know, I think it used to be called European harebell. So it's some sort of old plant that Europeans probably brought over as a decorative thing. And for some reason, it must be maybe climate change, something. All of a sudden, it's just everywhere. Any other questions? So that's essentially what I have to say about invasive.
Well, I want to mention that sometimes one of the challenges is you're looking at this plot thinking, now what is native and what is invasive? What should I get rid of? And phones are so good. I have this little app called Seek on there, and I could use my phone and take a picture of it and it'll tell me what it is. And if it's one that I want to get rid of or not, which is really nice, makes me feel really educated and learn a lot about that way.
Right.
Because we have different invasives depending on where we live. Up here, there's a lot of tansy. And
yes.
thistles can cause problems too. What are you going to be doing now as fall comes for your plots at your church, Laura?
We just kind of let, we kind of keep it groomed or watch, like the coneflowers got overpowered by a few other things. So kind of watch to restore some balance. And we're making plans in our church to expand it if we can. Our problem is going to be that the church has underground water systems, which is going to make it harder to excavate or to do any further planting. I have been doing research and Bruce, when you mentioned Doug Tallamy, he said like wild cherry, plum trees, willow trees are fabulous for caterpillars and for all pollinators. So I'm thinking maybe we could add to our garden by putting in some of the wild cherry plum trees in addition to plants. But yeah, so other than that, we leave it, you don't have to cut down native plants. In fact, it's for winter interest. It's interesting to watch them as they collect snow or ice crystals. It can make quite a poetic display in the winter. Plus, pollinators are using those plants to shelter them through the winter. And so it's a good idea if you can just to leave all the seed heads, and birds come and they'll eat the coneflower seeds and other seeds. It's very enjoyable to watch birds come in the winter and just delight in all of that growth that you left up.
And now somebody was putting in solar panels, and I know you have some solar panels at your church. Do you have any plantings underneath them?
We didn't per se. We have a rock, kind of a border, and kind of a mound of sands. Native things grow up in it, but it's right in front of our community garden. So we just kind of keep it fairly clean right there. But if we were to do an extensive display of solar, which we were going to do, more solar panels, and we had everything in place to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act and get some of the tax rebates and such. But our church wants to do a capital campaign and add to the church, and said they would fold it into that. The unfortunate thing is our church is at maximum for hard surfaces. We cannot build anything more because there's too much impermeable surface. So they're looking to see if they can buy a little property.
Okay, well then this leads to another one that was posed, ground planter boxes or raised boxes or pots. Now native plants, their root systems can extend 6, 8, 10 or more feet into the ground, and they survive well without a lot of help. But if they're in an above ground planter, can they still make it? Does anyone know about that? Or in pots? Or is that a little shaky?
Well, I think if it's in really large pots, they could. And if it's kind of in a sheltered area, maybe in the winter where it's not getting, a full wintry blast. I don't know. I don't do that myself.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Or this is a good time to pose questions if you have. I did get some of them, and I'm trying to read, but I'm not doing a real good job of that. So let's open it up here. Do you have any thoughts? Is this the time to pull the non-natives out before we get to next spring?
Anytime is good. Yes.
Yeah, especially if you're feeling a little feisty.
Yes.
Okay. Beth, would you take, I'm sorry, Beth, we're getting down to the wire here, but I mentioned that Beth is our communications coordinator and does the website, the newsletter, the Facebook page, and some duties with our annual EcoFaith Summit next spring too, which I hope you'll all attend. Beth, you want to talk about those resources? Where did she go? Oh, there she is.
Yes, I can do that. I will share the EcoFaith website here in a minute. Oh, I gotta find it. Oh, I think it's this one. No. So some pollinator resources on the EcoFaith website. We've got our we've got information about the EcoFaith Summit if you're interested in that. So far we've got the 2026, we've got the date and the theme. And then Jan mentioned the Green Blades Rising newsletter. If you're not receiving that already, all of the stories are and articles that have been in there are up on our website. If you are ever looking for anything, Russ has written a number of stories over the years of things that him and his creation care team at Bethlehem have done, and they're all up here on our website as well. If you wanted to go back and look, he's got the story of the goats is in there with pictures and some other stuff, silverware from Bethlehem, and some good resources on there. For pollinators sanctuary, we've got our pollinator plot page on the website. And on here, as you scroll, there's what is a pollinator plot resources. Here's our map and the list of who in northeastern Minnesota has pollinator plots, how to become a pollinator sanctuary, and then some resources. The past two share and learns are up on our website. We'll add this one later on if you're looking to go back and listen to anything again. Our resources, I got an updated page on that. So for our pollinator resources, we've got a number of just resources from around the state that are pollinator specific, not necessarily church specific, but pollinator specific. If you're looking for any sources of information, planning native gardens for kids might be a good one if you're bringing in your Sunday school or confirmation kids alongside of your pollinator work. And then I think I find where I put it. I think here under worship, under resources, we've got the blessing of the pollinator plots. We've got that blessing, and then the pollinator Sunday worship resources that Russ had mentioned last June 22nd. This past year, we encouraged congregations to celebrate Pollinator Sunday, and so these are the liturgy and music suggestion, worship planning resources. If you would like to use those in your congregation, we encouraged northeastern Minnesota to use June 22nd as Pollinator Sunday this last year. But there's no reason it has to be that date. You could take those resources and use them whenever works in your congregation. So I think those are the highlights. Yeah, if you're not receiving the Green Blades Rising, I encourage you to find this subscribe page and sign up to receive the emails. And it might not be a bad idea to ask your pastor if they're signed up as well. One of the resources we have for preaching that you could direct your preaching people in your congregation towards, if they're not already if they don't already know of it, is the Green Blades Preaching Roundtable, which is using the Revised Common Lectionary Sunday texts and offering a reflection on how those texts connect with our care of creation. So just another way to wrap everything back up together and surround the whole congregation with care of creation and with care of creation through pollinators.
Thank you, Beth. There's no lack of things to read and look at and do, that's a good way to live life too. Now, we've kind of reached the end of our time. We did not have a time to have a lot of conversation back and forth. You can email questions or concerns, and I will try to send them off, to the right person to answer. But, for gardening things, your master gardeners in your area are awfully good too, and probably closer by than any of us. But I want to thank you all so much for coming to the Share and Learn. Thank you to all of you who contributed information and ideas. I hope you're enjoying this unnaturally warm fall, getting outside for a little contemplative time with God and creation. As Pastor Kristen had mentioned, sometimes the problems of the day are so overwhelming. It's rather a challenge to address them. But we rely on God to give us determination to fight the good fight. I'm going to send you off with words that Pastor Dave Carlson of Gloria Dei used in a benediction for his congregation. Go in peace. Do not lose heart. So thank you all again for your work on behalf of God's creation.